Bosnian Refugees by Christopher Weller. 1,206,700 people from Bosnia have become refugees. This makes Bosnia ranked third in the world for its number of refugees. 7.7% of all refugees in the whole world are from Bosnia. There are many reasons for these high number of people from Bosnia becoming refugees, but they all branch from the ethnic discrimination within Bosnia, which led to the war between the Republic of Bosnia and Herzegovina and the Republika Srpska. Bosnia is, as it was before the war, dominated by three main ethnic groups: the Serbs from Serbia, the Croats from Croatia, and the Muslims or Bosniaks, basically, that originated in the area. All of these different ethnic groups historically have had many conflicts, and therefore, in trying to rule their own country, they have very different ideas from one another. Here it shows the percentage of Bosnia controlled by these three different ethnic groups, the pink being Serbians, the green being Muslims, and the yellow being the Croats. The high numbers of these people are very centralized to specific areas, and therefore that's how the country will basically divide when the war broke out. When communism fell along with Yugoslavia, the region broke up into many different countries, one of which was Bosnia. Bosnia, being controlled by these three ethnic groups with a long history of conflict, had a very delicate government that was very well thought out, and they hoped would help maintain peace. The president of Bosnia was to be Bosniak or Muslim, while the president of parliament was to be Serb, and the prime minister was to be Croat. This was a good idea, but in the end it didn't really work out because the three branches of government didn't work together well enough. Therefore, the government fell apart after a very short period of time. After the government fell apart, the region split into many different factions. The largest factions was the army of Republika Srpska, which was mostly made up of Serbs and had the Serbian government supporting it. And then there was also the Republic of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which was mostly made up of Bosniaks, but the army of the Republic of Bosnia and Herzegovina worked very closely with the Croatian Defense Council, so they were mainly supported by Croatia. Here you see how the country split, with the western part of it being controlled by the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, while the northern and eastern parts of it was controlled by the Republika Srpska. Being that this was a war fought by different ethnic groups, there was a lot of ethnic cleansing and genocide during this war. In 1992, the war erupted and would continue until 1995. One of the largest cases of death was during the siege of Sarajevo, which caused 12,000 people to die. Throughout the country, in an attempt for ethnic cleansing and basically just through genocide, the armies were murdering, torturing, assaulting, raping, and arresting people of the opposite religion or ethnicity. The CIA directors said at a hearing that the Bosnian Serb assault has displaced tens of thousands of Muslims, led to the detention of perhaps several thousand more, and resulted in the apparent purposeful deaths of at least several hundred, a number that could increase to thousands as we learn more. He also said Bosnian Serbs took many Muslim men prisoner, and the fate of most of them is unknown. The International Red Cross has gained access to only a small number of detainees and estimates that some 6,000 refugees from Srebrenica remain unaccounted for. Exactly how many of these missing prisoners are in hiding or have been killed remains unclear, but a growing body of information from a variety of sources indicates that Bosnian Serbs have again committed atrocities in the region. He's speaking mainly of the Serbs, of the Bosnian Serbs' atrocities in terms of ethnic cleansing and genocide, but this was seen on both sides of the war, and this was one of the leading causes for people trying to leave the country and obtain refuge in other countries. Most of the people leaving Bosnia went to close countries that were most likely former parts of Yugoslavia. And if they didn't go there, they most likely went to other parts of Europe, because it was simply the closest place for them to go. Yeah, largely Montenegro, Albania, Croatia, and Serbia, which were all parts of the former Yugoslavia. Here you see Bosnia. Here's a map of Europe, and it shows Eastern Europe, which is where most of the people would flee to. You can see Bosnia is very close to Croatia, Serbia, Albania, which is where many of the people were fleeing to. Pull factors. Basically, the largest pull factor for almost all these refugees was simply peace and safety in these new countries. Yeah. Here you can see where in Europe specifically people went. The largest number was to former Yugoslavia. Well, many people went there. Also, many people went to Germany because there was a lot of economic prosperity in Germany, which there wasn't in much of Eastern Europe. And then Bosnian refugees that could afford it would go very far in search of, well, new jobs and basically just the idea of economic prosperity. So they would go as far as Australia and the United States if they could afford it. You see there's a great amount of people that went to the USA, and many people also went to Germany and Austria. So outside, the largest two places was Australia and USA, if they had enough money to afford that, which many of them did not. Effects on countries of refuge. In Germany, they were forced out as soon as the war was over because the people of Germany didn't really like them there, and they really weren't very productive because many people were uneducated and therefore couldn't hold any jobs. It was the same thing in the United States, where they were mostly uneducated and couldn't really hold many of the jobs that needed to be filled. So many of them ended up returning to Bosnia, either willingly or unwillingly. Like in Germany, many of them were forced out, and some even had to take up refuge in other countries because they couldn't return to Bosnia. And many just returned there after the war to find that they really weren't returning to much, and then they would have to go seek refuge elsewhere. This is how many people were returning from each faction, from some of the largest factions. Effects on Bosnia. Despite the return of almost half of the refugees, the country is still greatly affected. There's a very high unemployment rate and little government enforcement because the government is still very new, and there's a lot of ethnic disputes, and they can't really make very many decisions, much like before the war, because there was not really any success in the ethnic cleansing. So now there's just more hatred for the others, which makes it more difficult. This is refugee migration. Most people were leaving because they were forced out. It is both internal, because many people moved to different parts of the country to be safe within their army's borders, and this is also international because people were leaving the country. And then this is the same thing with both intra-regional and inter-regional. People were moving inside of the region of Bosnia and Eastern Europe, and some people were moving out if they could afford it. Okay, thank you, and goodbye.